everyone. So first of all, I would like to begin today with a very, very small story. So once upon a time, there was a chubby boy. He got a gift on his birthday. So the gift was basically a really nice, jazzy weighing scale. So just like any new thing, everybody finds new things fascinating. He also found it really fascinating. And since it was really jazzy, he started stepping onto it. And he started measuring his weight. The more he got onto the weighing scale, the more he started building an urge to start measuring and start improving. And since he was fat, he wanted to reduce his weight. So the moral till now is, once you start bringing in a sense of measurement into anything, you start building in some kind of focus. So now that he had identified, he started with his journey, and he started eating less, and he started exercising. And within 2 weeks, he had actually lost 2 kgs. Wow, he was really happy, and he was just about to celebrate, but then something happened. He started feeling very weak, and he wasn't feeling as energetic as he used to before. So he realized something's missing here. I'm following a target. I'm actually achieving my target, right? But then something has to be wrong. In spite of meeting my target of losing weight, I'm not feeling good. So he thought, let me figure out what's wrong. So he did a little bit of more research, and he read things on the net, and he figured out that actually it's not just your weight that you're supposed to lose. You actually have muscle, water, and fat, and primarily what you should be reducing is your fat, right? So now what's the moral? The moral is that just having a measurement is never ever going to be good enough. What is important is to have the right kind of measurement in place if you really want to have a certain kind of impact. Now that he had identified this, he went ahead and he started, actually instead of eating less, he started eating right, and he started exercising again. Now when he started doing this, he was losing weight the right way, but then he figured out that, hey, my inches aren't going from the way I actually wanted it to be. So that's when he realized that actually just taking weight is not going to be good enough. I need to start taking measurements of my body. So what's the moral? The moral is that just one right kind of measurement will never ever be good enough. You actually need to have certain multiple kind of measurements which help you take care of the various angles from where you can cover the entire thing. Great, he had identified this, and now after having measurements in place for his body parts as well, he made changes to his exercise routine, and he got results in the desired areas. So primarily by this small story, I wanted to bring out the point that, one, just because something is measurable and you measure it, you will not get any results. Two, even after you have identified the right kind of measurement, just one measurement might not be good enough. You will still need multiple kind of measurements in place. Three, so see, anything in general in life which is difficult to do, we skip it, isn't it? Right? Now, he had a jazzy machine with him. Actually, the machine itself had the ability to tell him what was the split for his weight in terms of fat percentage, mass, and all those things. He just had to install an app. Using that app and syncing the data, he had all the data, jazzy graphs available, and without any additional effort, he had all the information available up front. So if you make taking measurements really painful, nobody is going to be doing it effectively. But if you enable it through technology and you make the part of taking measurements completely automated, it will be of great help. Fourth, and most importantly, measurements are something which help you discover issues. Once you have discovered a certain kind of issue, you have fixed it. You need to retweak or figure out a new measurement to move ahead. You can't stick with the same kind of measurements forever and ever. So now that we've got the message Now let's see how do we apply all of this to software development. So as I mentioned, one accurate measurement can help us make a whole lot of difference. So now what was our mission? Our mission was primarily to create a delivery machine for faster execution of projects with better quality. And that I'm sure is a mission which everybody has, right? Everybody wants to build faster and better products. What was our chosen path? So we've been trying to move on this agile journey for the last 3-4 years, and we've picked up few practices from Scrum, few from Kanban, few from XP, and I've actually named it XP Scrumban. So the first and the foremost basic thing which was needed here was that we had to change all our measurements from me to we, because now we were on the agile path, and everything that we did it as a team, right? So what was our measurement mantra? Our measurement mantra primarily had 3 things. Again, nothing very unique, everybody does it: quantity, quality, and planning. What we ultimately realized is that if you want to improve the quantity, you have to ultimately play with the quality and planning. All these 3 things are very, very tightly correlated, and only if you make an impact on one, the other will improve. So now, just like our story, the first and the foremost thing was to get a weighing scale in place, right? So what was our weighing scale? I'm sure most of you who are sitting here and hoping that all of you are following Agile, you would be using one or the other tools which would be giving you a velocity chart. Does it? So I'm sure all of you would have seen this chart, fairly basic, fairly simple, right? You get it and it gives you the commitment and it shows you the ultimate work that you have completed, right? So how does this chart look to any one of you? What do you think of this? Yeah. Okay. But can you figure out some issues with this? Does anyone see any issues with this chart? Right. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Anybody else? Any other problem that you see with this chart?
Sorry, the completed is around 1560, and the committed varies from, say, 90 to 100 or over 100.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Somebody's boss is happy because his project manager is creating stretch goals for the team on a continual basis.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Looks like there is always a overcommitment.
Okay. Okay. Great. So, sure, go ahead. So, just like we had a weighing scale, I'm saying velocity chart is the most basic weighing scale that we have in place for measuring our team's quantity of work, right? That's a universal practice. All of you noticed and shared that you see a huge gap between what is getting committed and what is getting delivered, 1. 2, somebody mentioned that it's a good thing that velocity is steady and it's steadily increasing. Is this a good thing? Is this a good thing? Okay. So just like we had our weighing scale and we had our weight was reducing and it was a good thing, right? Similarly, we have a weighing scale here and we see a very, very obvious problem that there's a huge mismatch between commitment and delivery, but still the delivery is stable and it is increasing, okay? Now, when we had this kind of a situation, and believe me, this is again something which we've evolved and come over a period of time, and when we had this kind of a situation, and we went around asking people on the floor or our product managers, is the situation actually so? If the velocity is stable and things are improving, is it actually improving? We didn't get that sense. We got a very opposite sense. We got a sense that things have actually slowed down. We said, how come that's possible? The chart looks so nice. The only problem that I can see from the chart is that the commitment has a huge gap, right? Now let's look at this. So what do you see here? Here we have compartmentalized and created 4 buckets out of the work that we are actually doing. We've created a bucket for the planned work. We've created a bucket for the unplanned work that springs up and comes into our iteration at the last moment. we've created a bucket for the bugs, right, that we are fixing. And we've created a bucket for stuff that we are actually making live. Now if you see and look at the bifurcation here, the picture is exactly opposite of what we had seen in the first one. There we could see that the velocity was actually increasing, and here if you see that the planned stuff and what is going live is actually decreasing. So actually if you pressurize people to do things faster and faster and faster, at times it leads to quality deterioration. More bugs get produced, you are effectively fixing more and more bugs in the next iteration. So actually you are not producing more work out, you're only fixing what you had broken in the last iteration, right? So just like our weight, now this is a split. This is the fat, this is the mass, this is the water, and we figured out that what we were actually supposed to increase is not what is actually increasing. It's the other way around. So now what were our learnings? So the first one, all of you mentioned, too much is getting planned, but too little is getting done. Predictability is obviously poor because we are picking up things. So at this point in time, the way we used to work, we have 2-week iterations, and we used to do our entire iteration planning on the second last day, or let's say 1 day before the sprint was supposed to start. That's when the stories would hit us. That's when the entire team would consume those stories, read about them, do the analysis, right? Figure out what is supposed to be done, do the estimation, put them into a bucket and start working. That's how we were doing. Since all of this was happening at the last moment, we had a lot of teams, a lot of interdependencies which could not be ironed out. Again, we saw that the bugs are increasing. Now why are the bugs increasing? Primarily again for the same reason. We are discussing everything on the last moment. We don't have clarity on what is supposed to be built, how we are going to build it, right? So obviously a very, very valid byproduct is large number of bugs. Unplanned stories getting added, that too in a running sprint. What does that mean? You have no time for any analysis at all. You have no time for figuring out what and how of a story. So obviously the quality is going to suffer in a way. Story is not going to production. We figured out that our stories are actually not going to production because they don't actually follow the invest format. The stories have been split and they are getting called as stories now, but they are actually not stories. People simply take large requirements, split them up either into horizontals instead of a vertical split, put them as a story, and obviously nothing can go out because it's just a horizontal. At times we used to have stories which were only for dev, only for test. Finally we moved to complete vertical stories which were full functional areas, right? So we identified all these issues once we had that right kind of measurement. Now what were the changes that we adopted? First of all, we moved our backlog grooming to iteration -1. So what we said that obviously the team is anyway spending bandwidth, it's not that they're not spending bandwidth on discussing and defining what is supposed to be made and how it is supposed to be made, and ours is a product company, everything is in-house, we could actually control it. We said let's move the entire planning bit of what and how to 1 iteration before. So the same activity which we were actually doing earlier on in the same iteration, we moved it to 1 iteration before. We included all developers, testers, product owners, architects. We made everyone collaborate, sit and discuss and do the entire backlog grooming together. We focused on this thing that generally people had a tendency of only discussing the what. We also encouraged them to start discussing the how. How are they going to make a story? Start having technical discussions around how something is going to get made. That also eventually helps you do the story splitting right, helps you arrive at the smallest possible unit that you can actually ship out later. We started focusing a lot on breaking of stories, as I mentioned, and now we have vertical slices, which are full functionalities, which can eventually go out. Another thing which we started is that instead of writing all our test cases later on, all our test cases contributed by everyone in the team are now written as acceptance criteria and provided upfront as a part of the story itself. Last but not the least, we started measuring planning efficiency. And what is planning efficiency for us? It is primarily a very, very simple thing. Whatever you are committing and whatever you are delivering, a simple percentage of that. Once we started measuring that, the teams automatically started focusing more towards planning and then picking stuff rather than picking stuff on the go. It obviously created a pressure on the product team to start giving us things beforehand instead of bringing them on the last moment or after the sprint had started. So initially they were not happy, but finally when they saw that the quality has started improving because of these initiatives, now they have started they are now happy, yes. So basically during backlog grooming, we identify all the test cases. So see, as I said, our backlog grooming comprises of, first of all, defining what has to be made. What itself takes care of all the test cases. So see, test cases are nothing but acceptance criteria or alternate path. It's just that we have the habit of calling them as test cases. We've started discouraging people from even calling them as test cases because we want people to think. So see, ultimately a test case is simply a particular condition which you will simulate to ensure that a software product works, right? For something to work, you have to build it, right? So all we are saying is that when you are thinking of what is supposed to be built, think of every possible thing. Whether what are the validations, whether what are the various browsers, right? Whether this functionality is going to be built only for web or for mobile app as well or for mobile site as well, right? Whether you're going to approach this from page A or from page C and B as well. So think of all these things in backlog grooming itself and start putting all this information in the story itself. So that was another difference. So see, earlier on we used to create test cases separately in whatever different tool. What now we are encouraging is that all of this information should be put into the story itself in Jira. Because again, something which is accessible easily has a higher chance of getting read. Instead of something which is a step away and somebody has to open an Excel or go to a tool and then read it and consume it, what we are saying is put everything up front in Jira itself. So that's where everybody collaborates and does it. And later on, if they need to refine or obviously put on more details, they do that as well. So see, now what we do is, so as I mentioned, we have 2-week iterations, right? Let's say today I am on iteration 1, right? First day of iteration 1, we would start the backlog grooming for iteration 2. What we've told our product managers is, just to ease their pain as well, don't give us everything. Just start giving us one story every other day. So what we try and do is that mostly, and again, we've left it flexible for the teams. So the moment they have their dipsum, post their dipsum, they spend 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and they groom 1 or 2 stories every day. So everybody does it in the way they like doing it, right? But primarily we ask the product managers to just give us 1, 2 stories or 3 stories, whatever is fine with them. We have not set a precise frequency, but what we've said is that we have to complete the exercise starting as soon as possible and finish it before the next iteration starting.
It is happening almost every day.
Yes, every day. And as I said, some teams might be doing it every second day, some teams might be doing it every third day, right? And again, different teams have come up with different practices. So what happens now is, so let's say a few people, what they've done, they've created internal teams. So what one group will first do backlog grooming for one set of stories, another group will do it for another, third will do it for the third, and then they will talk to each other. So different teams, we left it open. The only thing that we said is that you have to start doing this activity 1 iteration before, and we've told the product managers to provide us as many stories as possible, as soon as possible, 1 at a time, 2 at a time, whatever is convenient for them.
Have any such scenario where say, it requires business environment also, where business sitting not in the same location?
So see, thankfully for us, that situation doesn't arise because as I said, ours is a product company and our entire Naukri product team sits with us on the same floor in the same building. But having said that, we also have situations where we get a lot of urgent customer requirements at the end moment. So we are not saying that the unplanned bucket has completely gone away for us, but we have reduced it substantially Since we've put a focus on it, people have started now questioning, okay, if it's an urgent customer requirement, we'll still pick up and do it. But it should be one. It should not be something where the product did not actually give us the stories and they've come up with the story at the last moment. So that differentiation has now set in.
The purpose of asking that question is that how are you getting time from business for the backlog grooming?
Oh, okay. So see, again, they were all anyways doing this activity. So they also spend 5-10 minutes daily with us, right? And we have so many product managers at various levels who were anyways working with us to do this activity. It's just that now we split the entire activity. So earlier on, people would sit and do it for, let's say, 2-3 hours together. Now they're doing it in 5, 10, 15 minutes chunks every other day. So that's the difference.
Just one question on this tester contribution. Just wanted to know, how does it work for you? I mean, is that in the same sprint when the analysis is done, the testers also contribute towards the acceptance test, or is just the BA activity they define a high-level acceptance test? You know, when this feature is developed, this is the expected thing out of it. So how does it work for you?
So see, as I mentioned, so let me just reiterate your question. So what you're saying is, how do we come up with the acceptance criteria?
Yeah, because for us, because when I see it is like a BA has written a story. On top of it, before even starting a development, a tester is contributing that these are the test cases
Okay,
which should pass.
no. So let me just clarify. And as I mentioned, so see, first of all, backlog grooming in our scenario is done with the entire bunch. So the product or the, so we don't have a person something like a BA. We have product managers. They come up with stories. Once they have identified and logged a story, tester, developer, and let's say if an architect is involved or required, then all these people first of all do, and what we've done in a team, we've identified few senior people who do first level grooming. So they will look at a story and they'll figure out, first of all, is it a story or is it an epic? Do we need to break it down into smaller chunks or not? Once they are done with this activity, then the entire team reads those stories and contributes towards them. And even for the acceptance criteria, as you mentioned, yes, whosoever, so let's say a team has 2-3 testers, all those 2-3 testers would contribute, and not just the testers, everybody else is also encouraged to contribute all the acceptance criteria. So when they are discussing the what and the how of a story, that's when they come up with the acceptance criteria. And they try and do as much justice as possible, as I mentioned. So obviously they might not be able to identify everything to the 100% level, but still they've got better and they've started doing it to 70%, 80% now.
So they are all part of the grooming activity?
Yes, yes, everybody contributes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Madam. Ma'am.
And then we come back to more Q&A.
Okay.
Just a request.
Ma'am.
Sorry. I'll take your question as well, sure.
Backlog grooming, you mentioned that you also talk about how
Yes.
user story needs to be done.
Right.
So do you see scenarios where, product manager influencing how part, because that is the part where, craftsmen or engineers are, supposed to
So
focus
no,
on?
how is generally not decided by the product managers. They are only involved in defining the what. How, as I said, is done by the developers and the technical architects. So again, we have various architects associated with teams. Depending on the size of a feature or something, technical architects also get associated, and they help in defining how we should be building a certain feature. And see, as I mentioned, we anyways do these things. The only difference is we were doing it when we were going to build it, just let's say a few hours or a day before it. Now we are saying do all of this at least a week, 10 days in advance, so that you do it better. Okay.
Ma'am, I have a question and a sub-question. First,
Sure.
the question is, how much did you stick to these changes or commitments during the planning, during the final stages of your release, final iterations or sprints?
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
how much did you stick to the commitments? Were you able to stick to all these principles and complete it, or did you?
So see, we've more or less been sticking to this now. And again, it's a long road. So as I mentioned, it's not something that all of this has happened overnight for us.
Yeah,
We've
on
been
the
working on
final
this
stages
journey.
of the release.
So see, even if it's a final stage of a release, we still stick to this process for sure. Now we do that. We're able to do that. The only difference is towards the end of a release, whenever we are doing PAT, the amount of changes that we get are much more. But still, the process that we follow remains the same.
We had a problem in our team.
Okay.
On the final stage of the release, yes, this is the sub question which I mentioned. There's a sales team saying that we had some pre-demos and the customers need this requirement in this release. Testing team came and said there are some bugs in the end minute. Some development said some definition of done activities are there. Documentation team came saying that there is something to complete on the last minute changes. So we are not able to stick to the commitments which we took in the planning day. So how did you face and solve these kind of problems?
So see, I would say the biggest or the smallest thing to do to stick to anything that you want to do is, again, use the agile way, which is try and make all these things first stick to the smallest unit. If you are able to do it at the smallest unit, cumulatively you will not be left with a lot of backlog. So just like you mentioned, so again, I'm going to cover that in the follow-on slides, that now all the UT, FT and everything that we do it with every story. Since we don't create a lot of tech debt, we don't have to do a lot of running around at the last moment. So does that make sense?
When some customers come and say that we expect something in this.
So as I mentioned, we still keep some window for the unplanned stuff. It's not that that has gone down. It's not completely vanished, but it's just that it has gone down dramatically.
Okay,
Sure.
so rest
Should
of
I
the
just-
questions? Yes,
Okay.
after Meetu finishes.
Yeah, and I wasn't finished. I was just done with one section. So this was just one measurement that I spoke about, okay? Now let's come to the results. So after implementing all of this, if you see now our commitment has gone down, we've actually saved a lot of bandwidth, which earlier on we were spending in doing that additional planning, which we were never actually executing. And every 2 weeks we were anyways just redoing that planning, right? So we saved some kind of bandwidth there. We've brought in our commitment very close to what we deliver now. We've reduced our bugs and our unplanned stuff, and we have improved on whatever has to go out live. So these are the results which we've been able to achieve by this one measurement. Now let's move to the second part, which is quality. So how do you define quality? Any one of you would want to share how do you currently define quality before I share it? 0 bugs. When? Post-production. Okay. So I hear him say that 0 bugs post-production. Anybody else? So I'll not take a lot of time. So yeah, so primarily one thing which I hear very clearly and we used to follow as well is that the best measure of quality is 0 bugs post-production, right? But what we realized is that this is no longer a good measure. It's not just good to ensure that once you go live, right, you have 0 bugs. Because ultimately what matters is the entire journey. If you want to speed up your process of development, how can it be good enough that you generate thousands of bugs while you are developing, and then after thousands of rounds of testing, finally when you deliver something, it's 0 bugs. First of all, there's nothing like a 0 bug. It's just that it's not discovered yet, right? But still, it's not a good enough measure. So we thought, let's try and define a scale for quality, right? Which helps us improve the process and not just the final outcome. So final outcome obviously is here to stay and will always stay, but that's not the only thing which is important. So now, again, if you have a leaking tap at home and you want to fix the leaking tap, what do you have to do? You have to first figure out where is it actually leaking, right? You can't fix the leakage unless and until you know the exact point of leakage. True? Similarly, if you want to work towards defect prevention, which is what we are working very aggressively towards, instead of defect identification, then you have to figure out what are the places where the leakage is actually happening, right? So one, introduction points, where are the defects actually getting introduced? 2, what are the kind of defects? Obviously there has to be a reason why a defect is coming, okay? 3, what are the ways in which we are catching defect? As I mentioned, if something is easier to do, people will use it, but if something is really difficult, people will not use it. We've actually seen over the years that even if you have automation in place, it doesn't get run, People forget to run it because it's not convenient. It takes time. It has a hassle, right? So considering all these things, we came up with something called a build quality meter. So using all these things that I spoke about, defect introduction points, and the nature of defects, we created a simple formula assigning various weightage to all these parameters depending on our needs, right? And we came up with a very, very simple build quality report, which is published back to all the people, all the Scrum teams post every iteration. So now what does it give? It gives you the exact nature of bugs, it gives you a cumulative score, and it gives you a ranking. Whether the build quality was bad, good, average, excellent, okay? And this is for things which are during development. This is not only and only for post go live, because the idea is to work towards defect prevention and not just catching defects, okay? So this was one measure that we created. Another measure which is fairly simple, I'm sure all of you would be doing it. We started measuring our UT and FT coverage. We actually measure it again after every iteration. All these reports are completely automated. We pull out data from Jira, from Jenkins. We put this into Excel, we generate these reports, and we put them into mails and we send it across to people. So all of this is automated. We don't have to work towards creating all these reports. So it's like every iteration there's a small deck, it gets generated and it gets published to 20, 30 Scrum teams that we have. Another measurement, as I mentioned, what we realized, we did a lot of automation, whether it was UT or it was FT. We had written so many tests, but we figured out they don't get run so often. Now, why do they not get run so often? One, it's a hassle. You don't find a place where to run those tests, from where to run those tests, right? Once you start running those tests, the tests take a lot of time, and the FTs that we have were maybe not so reliable. They had a lot of flakiness in them. So effectively, people were not executing them. So we created a plain simple report. Again, it is something directly from Jenkins. You can pull out this data, and you can figure out on a daily basis, number of jobs, what is their execution percentage. So this is a very good number that I have put in here, but initially when we started with it, it was fairly low. It was fairly low.
Sorry to interrupt. I have a question on the previous slide. Can you please go back to the previous slide?
Sure.
So I want to understand, how do you measure the functional test coverage?
Okay. So see, right now we are calculating our functional test coverage on the basis of our test case bank. Mm-hmm. Since we are using PHP, we are trying to figure out a tool for code coverage as well. Mm-hmm. But none is available for PHP, so we are using our test case bank. So that's how we are calculating our FT coverage.
Okay.
So what we've done is, we've, just to give you a small idea, so since we have our product applications which are here to stay, we've created test banks for them, which are for the entire application collective test cases. So we are using a tool called TestLink, and we have these test case banks available in TestLink. We pull out these reports automatically from TestLink. So in TestLink itself, for example, for an application, I have 10,000 test cases. It's marked how many are automated. The ones that are automated also are connected with our framework in Jenkins, get automatically executed, right? Few are not applicable and few are manual. So that's how we are calculating our FT coverage. So as I mentioned, we started figuring out how much of our tests were actually getting executed. Now once we made these three measurements, one, as I said, the build quality meter, two, FT-UT coverage, three, the execution stats, right? What did we figure out? What we figured is, the first and the foremost thing is lack of focus. As I had asked all of you that for everybody, quality primarily means that post-production there should be 0 bugs. We wanted to make a shift in that focus and send down the message that it was no longer okay to generate bugs while you are developing something. Second, we figured out that there's lack of RCA. Till we had a tool and a jazzy figure and a number which was getting published back to the team, nobody cared. Nobody was categorizing the bugs correctly. Nobody cared whether it was a functional bug or what was the reason for the bug. Nobody was doing all of that. But the moment we started having a report, right? And by the way, we also have a leaderboard for these reports, which gives a very healthy sense of competition for the teams. Everybody started focusing. People started focusing on the number of bugs. People started focusing on the quality of the bugs. People started focusing on doing the RCA. Then we obviously figured out that there was insufficient impact analysis, lack of testing at the time of development, lack of awareness regarding implicit requirements. So any one of you would want to answer what is implicit requirements?
The entire process of discovery hasn't happened.
Okay.
I had a follow-up question on this very topic, but I decided to defer to the end of the session.
Okay.
Yeah, but I believe that's what I think it is.
Okay. Anybody else wants to maybe take a guess at what is implicit?
Which team never understands, and project, according to product manager, team should know it.
Okay. So yeah, brilliant. That's exactly what it is. So see, so as I said, I've been working with the same company for 10 years now, right? Naukri has evolved, but primarily the platform remains the same. Ultimately, it's a website, right? There's a huge amount of learning in how a website should work. Fine? All of us would expect a certain kind of behavior when we are interacting with any kind of form on any given website. Is it true or not? Now, why do we expect a product manager to write or reiterate it every time when he is writing a story? Why should he write that, let's say, a tab should work or an enter key should work, right? Nobody's going to write such kind of things. But actually, when it comes to development and the kind of bugs that we get, we figured out a lot of the bugs actually fall in this category. So there is a lot of it which is depending on the domain knowledge and on stuff which has been discovered over the years hundreds of times. So what we've done is we've actually compiled a list of implicit requirements and we've just published it back to the team. And the least that we tell them is that no bug should ever get discovered in this category. And if it does, then we've assigned a very high weightage in the calculator. Because again, we are not expecting people to reinvent the wheel every other day. We want to optimize energies, right? That's how our team productivity will go up eventually, right? That's the idea. So till the time, so we had these requirements forever and ever now. We've had these for like 3-4 years. But again, awareness about these requirements was very low till the time we came up with this calculator. As I mentioned, we had automated tests, but they were not getting run adequately. We had flaky automated tests. Anybody wants to take a guess at what are flaky automated tests? Always passing, okay. I wish that was the scenario, but yeah, absolutely. So basically the same test which passes at times and fails at times, right, is called a flaky test. Another big reason where majority of the community actually does not use automation is because although you spend so much of time doing automation, you don't actually rely on your tests. You feel that you will, even if you run the tests, you will get, let's say, results which are not reliable, right? And so it's just not good enough to run them, okay? High execution time of automated tests. So all the UTs, I'm sure all of you would know, are fairly fast. But any of the tests which are written at the GUI level are fairly slow and take a very large amount of time. So a lot of stuff has to be done to ensure that you use various ways and bring down that time. So these were our learnings after we came up with these 3 measurements. Now, what were the adopted changes? Backlog grooming we've discussed already. We started doing technical design discussions in the backlog grooming sessions itself. Upfront availability of test cases helped us bring down the number of bugs substantially. It helped us a lot. Testing throughout towards defect prevention, as I mentioned. It was no longer good to ensure that your build went out and there were no bugs discovered in it. The whole idea was to work towards defect prevention and ensure that no bugs were coming throughout the life cycle. For that, we started doing unit level testing, peer level testing, code reviews, automatic UT execution using Jenkins, parallel functional automation testing. So primarily in most of the organizations, the FT, the functional testing, is done post the iteration closure. What we've been doing now is, we've been doing our entire automation in the same iteration along with the deliverables. It is a part of our definition of done. What we've realized is that automation is not something which is only and only for regression. We try and use our automation done through FTs for first round progressive testing as well. Then again, automatic execution of these FTs through Jenkins. Focus towards creating reliable tests. So actually I did not mention two other measurements that we also created. The measurements were around actually testing out the flakiness of our tests and the execution time. Now again, these are very, very small pieces of information which are already available in all the various tools that we are using. So for example, Jenkins gives you this information within the reports. But how many of you would have seen it? Great. So again, we just pulled out this information, and in this today's world where everybody wants home delivery, stuff delivered on their table, that's what we did. We pulled out information and we home delivered, we created mails and sent it to people's inbox. We sent them that these are your tests that are running every day, this is the flakiness percentage, and this is the execution time. Finally, we implemented Selenium Grid to ensure that we were able to bring down the execution time of our FTs. And by measuring the measuring, we discovered a lot of issues with our coding, a lot of bugs in our coding, ways in which we were doing parallel execution. We fixed all of that and we brought the flakiness of our tests down. As I mentioned earlier on, bug causal analysis wasn't getting done very adequately. We started doing that with every bug that gets logged. We started identifying whether a UT was written, a FT was written or not. And let's say if it was written, why did we still get the bug? Either we did not execute our tests, or let's say we said that something has been actually covered, but it's not covered. So it's like a closed loop which helps us bring in the qualitative aspect as well. Because at times what happens, I write a test case and I say, yes, I've actually automated it, but there could be actually 20 scenarios in it, out of which 15 I have done and 5 I have left out. You could actually get a bug in those 5, and finally if you link this back, you figure out that yes, it was missing, and you go and automate that as well. We've created rosters for doing the analysis and for automated test failure analysis. So basically, every day our scripts are running and we get certain amount of failures. Now that we have reduced our flakiness, we've defined a kind of roster where maybe one person for a week looks at those failures. Those failures are also automatically logged into Jira. People just go to Jira, figure out if it's a genuine bug, assign it. If it's not, then they close it. So primarily after doing all of this, what were the kind of results that we were able to achieve in the quality? We were able to improve our build quality. So let's say when we began, we were at 70–75%. Okay? People worked really hard and they got it to 90%. When they got it to 90%, we changed the parameters in the build quality meter and we made it slightly more stringent, and they again went back to 80–85%. So all I'm also trying to tell you is that once you have a measurement and you work on it, you will also have to keep on retweaking it. You can't just let it be. And after doing all of that, we were actually able to reduce the number of bugs that we get on live, improve our automation coverage, reduce our flakiness, reduce our execution time, and improve our, during development, build quality. So our key takeaways, as I mentioned in my story as well, it's extremely important to have a metric, but not just a metric, the right kind of metric in place. That's what matters. Once you have any kind of metric, you measure, review, improve, and you have to keep on following this cycle again and again. You will always need multiple metrics to cover multiple angles. Qualitative reviews are the backbone of any measurement. Just by having a measurement in place, you will not achieve anything. Because at times, once you have a measurement, I don't know how many of you are using Fitbit. Anybody is using Fitbit here? Okay. So Fitbit is primarily just a pedometer. It measures your steps, right? And you have a feature in it where you can actually run competitions in it, okay? So till the time I am just using Fitbit to measure my steps, it's mine. I want to do it because I want to remain healthy. Now let's have a competition. So what I can do, I can invite 4 of my friends and we'll compete to see how well we are doing against each other. Once this competition starts, what happens? People have a habit of tying their Fitbit to their pets and to their children so that they can run more, right? And you can win a competition, isn't it true? If you don't have qualitative measurements, qualitative reviews to take care of the overall picture.
I mean to say, when we are going me to we, then we have leaderboards as well for the sense of competition. And one more thing which we have often seen, it's like a disadvantage because say some of the team members are not working that great enough, but at the end of the day, again, it's we. So I mean to say, it's a bit contradictory as a statement. So if you have any...
Okay. So see, first of all, I would want to clarify about the leaderboard that I mentioned. I have actually shown you our measurement mantra, and I showed you that we have quantity, quality, and planning. We take all these 3 parameters for all teams, and the leaderboard that we have is for teams. It's not for team members. So primarily, if I have team 1 and team 2, nowhere are we publishing any information pertaining to a team in terms of absolute with one another. What we are looking at is only a percentage improvement. So what I mean is, this is team A, this is team B, you're doing 50, they're doing 100, you went from 50 to 55, they went from 100 to 110. All I am concerned is that they're also doing 10% improvement and you're also doing 10% improvement. Nowhere am I looking at the fact that they had a base of 50, you have a base of 100. We are not considering any of that. Okay. So this leaderboard is again on we and not on me. Okay. The other point that you've mentioned, which is a very, very valid point, and which is why I said in the last slide on the last thing, the most important thing is qualitative reviews, right? First of all, when you work in a team, it is really important for us to also help others in a team, right? So when I have a team commitment, as opposed to the earlier times when I had my own commitment, what I am saying is if you've committed 10 stories and you are really so fast that you are able to finish your 2 stories, somebody else is lagging behind. Why don't you go and help the other person bring up? Please be rest assured that you will have certain managers or seniors who will see this effort and you will get the recognition. So see, the biggest problem in all of this is that it's slightly different to, I guess, difficult to establish at times the recognition bit, which can only be done through qualitative reviews. There's no other way to tackle that. And what we also do, so we use Jira to signal or to actually mention. So I am a part of, let's say, team A. You can use certain labels or keywords to signal that this story has an integration aspect, or this is a dependent story. Another team needs to consume this story, or somebody else is waiting on this story, right? So that when the next team is doing their sprint planning meeting, they can simply pull out information from Jira and be sure that fine, these are the stories which we have to address in order to feed somebody else. This is one aspect. The other important critical aspect is that if the interdependent teams have common KRAs, then this also helps solve that. So let's say I am team A and my KRA is, let's say, only focused on doing a project, versus 2 teams have a common KRA that you have to improve number of registrations. It automatically gets solved. Because once both of you are glued onto the fact that you have to improve registrations and not just deliver a story or a project, it also helps basically collaboration. Because it is fundamentally a problem of collaboration, So we use Jira plus common KRA setting as a way to resolve it.